Using a weapon like a sword is all well and good, but it's certainly not everyone's forte. There are quite a few people who prefer to fight differently and choose to employ magic. They take those dusty tomes other fighters see as useless and use them to perform extraordinary spells. And now it's time I name my favorite of those spell slingers. First off, let me lay some ground rules. To qualify for this list, the character in question must have at least 75% of their skills be magic and cannot have any skills that directly heal allies in any way. I already did a list of healers, I do not need that bleeding into this. Alright, time to spell out some mages. Let's roll! A Mario character on a list like this? Yeah, sure enough, there is a mage amongst his wide circle of friends. In Thousand Year Door, you encounter the 3 Shadow Sirens in Chapter 2, the leader Beldum, the Oaf Marilyn, and the seemingly reluctant Vivian. They try to impede Mario, but ultimately fail. And then later on in Chapter 4, they attempt it again, but this time with a bomb! Except, it was dropped and Vivian was tasked to find it. Mario helps her, which seems like a terrible idea, mind you, but fortunately, it's broken so it all works out. It's at this point that Vivian decides to cut ties with her sister entirely and go with Mario, and after helping take out Dupless, she's with the gang for good. She's quite reserved for the most part, but packs a startling amount of determination, which makes her a really likable character. That's fine and all, but how is she in battle? Well, Vivian, as the red hat could indicate, is a specialist in fire. Her Shade Fist ability can light her target ablaze, causing damage each turn, and she can also use Fiery Jinx to burn up a whole squad of enemies. She can also use Infatuation to confuse enemies, which is a lifesaver in certain fights, but her most critical ability in my opinion is Veil. For one turn, Vivian will drag herself and Mario into the shadows, making them completely safe from any and all attacks. This ability is also used in the field to avoid detection and to solve certain puzzles. Vivian is definitely a good character, but unfortunately, her small moveset kept her from getting any higher. Still, her spirit burns bright, and I can't take that away from her. Choosing a character from the Persona series was actually really difficult, not because there were too many, but because finding one that fit my parameters was not easy. Most of the potential mages either had too many physical attacks or also had healing skills. However, one character does fit the bill, a certain brown, fluffy-haired high schooler. Haru Persona is a third year at Shujin Academy and the daughter of the CEO of a major food company. Despite her family though, she's quite soft-spoken and enjoys simple things in life, such as gardening. She adored how her grandfather managed his cafe when she was younger and doesn't exactly approve of how her father handles things. Late in Persona 5, she manages to stumble into the metaverse by accident while following Morgana, and after seeing her father's shadow basically throw her away, she awakens to her persona, Milady, who has a Gatling gun coming out of her dress! Only in Persona, people! And yeah, that isn't just for show. She has access to triple down and later on one-shot kill, but more importantly, she specializes in Psi magic. Her Psi attacks not only powerful, but also do bonus damage to enemies suffering from mental status conditions such as confusion and fear. On top of that, she can also erect shields for allies to reflect attacks, cure status conditions, and even gains access to the best buffing move in the game with Heat Riser. Haru is the premier offensive support ally in Persona 5, and her capabilities are second to none. It doesn't take a second to know why she's here at all. Hey, who says mages are only to be found in RPGs? There are a few outliers in other genres, and when I was planning this list, I knew the perfect candidate right off the bat. 9 the Phantom. In Blazblue Central Fiction, she's one of the playable characters, and man oh man is she fun to use. But formalities first, let's go over her character. Well, I mean, I could, but I need to be careful because Blazblue is a rabbit hole that I don't think has a bottom. 9 is a rebellious and hostile witch with a massive superiority complex. If you're not one of her close allies, you better hope you don't cross paths with her, because she will absolutely eviscerate you in about 27 different ways. And yeah, her arrogance isn't there for nothing, she's absolutely lethal! 9's main attacks utilize fire, wind, and water magic to solid effect, but it's her drive where her real powers lie. Depending on what attacks hit her opponent and the order they're in, she can let loose a whole slew of devastating attacks. These range from a grounded plant strike, a wisp that darts around, a bomb with a cross-shape explosion, or raining magic shots from above. Or if you're particularly good at avoiding getting hit for a few seconds, you can cause an incredibly powerful explosion on our poor victim, which does insane damage. And the showcase of her abilities gets dialed up way past 11 when she unleashes her astral finish. She immobilizes her opponent with magic fire, then calls down a meteor storm that destroys absolutely everything. The entire battlefield and everything around it gets engulfed in massive amounts of fire, and it is a sight to behold. 9 is definitely my favorite character to use in Central Fiction, and with her magic abilities, she easily gets a spot here. In the days of old, there were scarcely any role-playing video games, simply platformers and adventure games with no roles to play at all. The future seemed bleak, until one company, denoted by a polygon, bequeathed us one Final Fantasy. Suddenly, you can choose the roles your characters could fill and embark on an adventure, just like those tabletop games. And despite it being a Final Fantasy, it will be repeated numerous times, until one day, a specific 9th game gave us a mage of exceptional skills, modeled after the original Black Mage. And his name is... Vivi. And with whatever the heck that was out of the way, let's talk about this boy. Vivi is a young mage with exceptional talent, but he doesn't really understand his place in the world. He accidentally gets mixed up with Zidane and his crew, and they take him along. During the adventure, they find a factory creating black mages just like him, and this hits him about as hard as an Ultima spell to the face! And yet, he wondered why he had emotions, and later on in a village of black mages, he learned they might stop functioning after a certain point. Despite the imminent doom to this child, he decides to make the most of the time he has left, and work with Zidane and everyone else to save the world. Well, that was a lot of exposition, but fortunately, talking about his battling capabilities is a lot easier. As his appearance would suggest, Vivi is a specialist in offensive magic. He can cast spells such as fire and thunder with great ease, and also power himself up with focus. But where he truly shines, quite literally actually, is with his trance. When Vivi enters the state, he can cast 2 spells back to back, which can result in absurd damage. Vivi is excellent for bosses in particular, as he can hammer on the damage against weaknesses. Kid may not have had much of a future, but he knew how to show off his skills. We shall never forget you. Especially since you keep showing up. How? It's widely known that many intelligent characters are the ones to prefer magic, whether they be independent scholars or teachers who wish to share their craft with others, and my number 6 spot is a little bit of both. Cyrus Albright. Cyrus is a professor at Atlas Stim's Royal Academy, and quite enjoys his job. He believes that knowledge is something that must be shared to everyone, and is quite insightful overall. Despite that, however, he's calm and respectful of his peers. Well, for the most part, because his headmaster Yvonne isn't too keen about Cyrus sharing information from the tomes in the castle, which he completely brushes aside. And more importantly, one of his colleagues is a thieving rat who sold tomes from the library to pay his debts. And one of those tomes is potentially very dangerous, so Cyrus makes it his goal to seek out that tome to keep it out of the wrong hands. In battle, Cyrus employs 3 types of offensive magic in fire, ice, and lightning. He can also discern enemy weaknesses when the battle begins and use his Analyze ability to do the same and also show enemy HP values. And then there's his divine skill, Aliphan's Enlightenment. This skill allows any magic that hits multiple enemies to hit only one, but greatly increases its power. Cyrus' battling capabilities are pretty simple for the most part, but that always makes him handy, especially if you give him other elements through subclasses. His exploits will certainly go down in the history books, and on this list as well. Bug Fables is quite an interesting experience. The entire game is set in a bugs world, and as a result, the types of locations you explore and the hazards you see are pretty unique. Such as in the first dungeon, where you see this normal-sized spider web with a bug inside. You rescue this moth, and he can't recall anything because of course he can't. However, in a spur of the moment, he encases an enemy in ice, and that's how you know Leaf is a keeper. As far as character goes, Leaf is the quiet one of the group, but also very insightful. At the same time, however, he brings his own brand of humor with his dry wit, and it is amazing. He tends to provide advice for the party and helps keep Vi in check. I'd love to talk about his backstory, however, that's delving into spoiler territory, and I don't want to ruin that for anyone. But that's fine, because his abilities in battle are really cool, pun totally intended. Leaf specializes in ice magic, and he can do things such as having an icicle erupt out of the ground and drop ice onto enemies to freeze them. But more importantly, he has a ton of great support capabilities, such as buffing allies, debuffing enemies, and casting shields. That last part specifically is pretty handy for certain battles, as well as in the overworld, when you just don't want to deal with enemies. Out of the characters in Bug Fables, I think Leaf is my favorite because he's just so intriguing, and in battle, he's easily the most helpful. Keep on being cool, dude. As opposed to Haru, picking a rep from the Fire Emblem series was really hard because there are just so many mages! Every Fire Emblem game I've played has a small handful of them, and a good number of them are notable for one reason or another. It was a tough call, but in the end, I gotta go with Three Houses' own Annette. Hailing from House Dominic, Annette enrolls in the Officers Academy under the Blue Lion class. She bears a crest due to her lineage, but despite said lineage, she's one of the kindest and most friendly souls you will ever meet. She works hard in her studies and always tries to help out whenever she can. And while she'll bumble on a few things here and there, that never gets her down, and she keeps on smiling the whole time. When it comes to her capabilities on the battlefield, however, she is one to be feared. Her growths are strong in her magic and dexterity stats, and in combination with the wind magic she uses, Annette can get quite crit happy. That's good news for your side, and bad news for any unfortunate flyers that are in her way. On top of that, she later gets a magic axe to use, which is not only really powerful coming off her great magic staff, but also has a special combat art that absolutely obliterates dragon units. I love Annette to pieces, and she earns a spot on this list with pride. Characters in Xenoblade are far more than just RPG classes. All of them have something to them that ultimately makes them greater than the sum of their parts. Shulk has his host of Monado wards, Ryan grabs aggro and exploits it, Riki is a veritable Swiss Army knife, and Melia, well, she's a special case. Formalities first though, who is Melia Antiqua? Well, she's effectively the princess of an entire tribe of bird people! Okay, maybe not quite bird people. She's quite humble and quiet overall though, and is an incredibly kind soul. Despite that, however, she has a strong sense of duty and often tries to handle things herself, which doesn't always work out so well. Interestingly, she's also half Homs, which doesn't sit well with some of the Council of the High Entia, and they try to assassinate her during her rite of passage. But she gravely underestimated Melia because she is quite the force. Melia's combat style focuses on summoning ether elementals in order to buff herself and nearby allies, as well as attack with them. For example, summon Bolt ups her ether stat and discharges a powerful attack. Earth ups defense and inflicts poison, and Aqua grants regeneration and has a lifesteal effect. And it's a good thing she can't cast these directly on allies because then she'd have to be disqualified. While all this is going on though, her talent gauge is building, and when it tops off, she enters her element burst state, where her damage is doubled and she gains access to incredibly powerful arts such as Mind Blast, which strips auras and inflicts Art Seal. I won't mince words here, Melia is really hard to use effectively. Most people I know couldn't come to grips with her playstyle. However, if you can master it, she is arguably the most powerful ally at your beck and call. Glory to the High Entia! If you went into this video without expecting me to do my scheduled gushing about the last story, then you clearly don't know me at all. This is one of my favorite games of all time, so I'm naturally going to be quite biased. And before I go into another love-filled rant, let's start talking about Yurick. The youngest of the mercenaries in Dagran's group, Yurick is a man of few words and isn't one to show much emotion, but that's not for the reason you think. When Yurick was young, his father was a renowned sailor and protected the island he lived on. However, when he went to fight pirates, he never returned, so Yurick and his mother left to find a new home. Unfortunately, Yurick's mother died on the journey, leaving him alone. He sees his mercenary work as a means of survival, and it's hard not to feel for him. That might be quite sad indeed, but when it comes time to fight, it's the enemy's turn to start crying. Yurick is a specialist of fire magic, capable of launching fireballs and creating fire circles. When diffused, these circles grant guard break, which allows you to bypass enemies' defenses and easily break their guard. He can also invert enemy magic circles, causing damage circles to heal you and enemy heal circles to damage them. And when the time comes, he can unleash his spirit ability, Mightier, which coming off his massive magic stack is absolutely lethal. Yurick may be quiet, but his skills speak for themselves, and once again, a candidate from this game I hold so dear couldn't take the top. But why is that? We've seen quite a few different kinds of mages on this list. There's a standard cloak and hat mage, scholars, and travelers. But my number one pick doesn't fall into any of those categories. And that's because Colonel Jade Curtis is in a league of his own. Out of all the mages I've seen in gaming, Jade is the one that always stuck out the most to me. As a high-ranking official in the Malkuth military, Jade's reputation is quite well known. He's an incredible tactician as well as a motivator for his troops. At the same time, however, he's also the funniest character in Tales of the Abyss. When he's around his troops or in serious situations, he keeps a straight face and knows exactly what to do. Any other time, on the other hand, and he's a completely different character. He cracks a multitude of jokes about his allies and enemies alike and gets his thrills just from seeing their reaction. You go in expecting a soldier, and you get the Joker! All these moments really cement him as one of my favorite characters in the Tales series as a whole, and once you add in his mage abilities, it's little wonder why he's at the top spots. Sure, he has a lance and a couple of arts with that, but his bread and butter is his magic arts. He uses arts with fire, water, earth, and wind elements, so no matter what, he's always useful. In fact, at the beginning of the game, he is so overpowered that he actually gets nerfed, and even in his weakened state, he's a force to be reckoned with. And as he gets stronger and stronger, he really shows how he earned his reputation, leading all the way up to his secret ace, Meteor Storm. It's just so beautiful. Between his incredible abilities and just how likable he is as a character, I can without any hesitation place Jade at number 1 on this list. I'm Arrow Dragon, and remember that sometimes you just gotta fight smarter instead of harder. And that's the end of my video. I hope you all had a magical time. This was definitely a fun list to tackle, but I'm not sure what's next to come, so if you have any suggestions, feel free to let me know. Also, I'll be attending MomoCon in Atlanta, Georgia this year, so you might just see me there. Well, until next time, this is Arrow Dragon, signing off.